Hi gang, Rob here. It is the evening of 21 December 2016, coming to you with a first impressions, a preliminary review of a knife that I've been waiting for, I don't know, gosh, seems like the better part of a year. A new release from our friends in Golden, Colorado, Spyderco. You guys may know, if you've been watching this channel very long, that I am an absolute freak for anything Gale Bradley, anything in CPM M4 steel. And here's sort of my proof of that statement. Gosh, I don't know, what was it, 4 years ago maybe? Something like that. Spyderco released its first collaboration with Blade Sports champion and knife maker Gale Bradley of Weatherford, Texas. And this was it. This is the Spyderco Gale Bradley folder. An extremely robust stainless steel liner lock, or you could say stainless steel frame lock with scales. A drop point blade, super skinny hollow ground from CPM M4. Not a tactical knife in any way. This knife is designed pure and simple for hard use cutting. And it loves wood. It loves to eat wood 3 meals a day. And this knife, I think, was a bit of a gamble for Spyderco. It's not cheap. Never has been cheap. Always hovered around the 180 mark. You know, for a liner lock with carbon fiber over G10 scales. Even with a modern super steel, that price point was a little steep, and frankly, it's a design that isn't for most of the modern folding knife market. It's not easy to close. The liner lock is extremely strong and well protected. You got to wedge your thumb down in there and push it over, and it hurts, frankly. Even if you have the correct hand on it, it's just not easy. Done by design. Mr. Bradley did not want this knife folding on your hand, no matter what you did in this handle, and he did a good job designing it. But you know, it was sort of a niche knife. It's well respected, but it didn't sell particularly well. So hold that thought for a minute. Next, because you know it did have a pretty loyal following, even though small, Spyderco did another collab with Mr. Bradley. This one called the Air, a little clipless, very tiny. I call it a fusion knife. You know, it's sort of old school because it goes in the pocket and it doesn't have a clip, but it's definitely modern in its design and construction. It's a titanium liner lock, CPM M4 Wharncliffe blade, and is that not sexy? With Nishigen glass fiber scales. Again, a knife that was a little nichey for Spyderco. They didn't sell a bunch of this knife. I'm not sure if they're even still making it, to tell you the truth. Still got that characteristic Gale Bradley handle shape, though. And then, oh gosh, what has it been? A year or two ago? This knife came out, the Gale Bradley Folder 2, with a little easier to manipulate liner lock mechanism. My right thumb is just not getting it. I'm not right-handed, guys, you know that. So this knife, just a little easier to manipulate. A little different design at the base of the blade. No 50-50 choil that scares people. A lower price point. I think these were down, around 130 bucks. This did come with that same carbon fiber over G10 scale, but I had Sketchin' Scales make me some beautiful redwood burl scales for this one. Love that knife. Love it. I love all three of them. So when I saw, oh man, I guess it was a very short Eric Glesser video, and I can't even tell you the channel. I think it was around Blade Show time last summer, early summer, June, I saw this knife. Comes in a Spyderco box, all that stuff. I saw the prototype of this knife, and I immediately put it on my personal watch list. And you know, I was on web retailer watch lists for this knife since I saw the video. And I'd keep checking back, and they'd say out of stock or coming soon. And I kept thinking, yeah, Christ said he was going to return soon too, and that's been a couple thousand years. Just what does soon mean in the Spyderco universe? I wanted to know. And I had money set aside for it. I almost spent it on something else. And this knife is called the Spyderco Advocate. Designed by, you guessed it, Gail Bradley of Weatherford, Texas. Spyderco CPM M4. And it's produced in one of our favorites, Taichung, Taiwan. So the Advocate, and gosh, I think you can truly see the family resemblance, can't you? The Advocate is the latest Spyderco collaboration with Mr. Bradley. I think you can really see it closed with these two. Handle shape's very similar. A little different at the butt end. So what do we got going on here? Well, we have, I think, a little more slender, a little sexier looking drop point blade than the first two versions with a gorgeous swedge. I always like drop points that have a swedge such that if you hold it just in the right light, the knife almost looks like a clip point. I don't know if I can get it to do it in this light. It's like if the top disappears, it just sort of looks like a clip almost. One main difference, and we'll kind of go at this knife from the blade back. I think the stock thickness is about the same, maybe a little slimmer even. I think it is a little slimmer than the two. A little slimmer than the one even. It's 114 thousandths. Those others are probably up about 120, 125. And this one is flat ground instead of hollow. And the grind is very high. The blade might be a little slimmer, less broad, yeah. So the grind is probably about the same height as the original Gail Bradley folder, maybe a little higher, and a slimmer blade. It ought to be a wicked slicer. With that said, as I measure the thickness behind this factory edge, it's about 22 thousandths at the base, about 23 or 24 through the belly, and up to 29 at the tip. About, well, 7 thousandths thicker behind the edge than the first two big Bradleys. But with that flat grind, it might slice about as well. Hard to tell. So what do we got behind this blade? Well, something's different, isn't it? We got us a flipper tab. Which is interesting because there's a couple things going on here. Notice the hole diameter. Clearly smaller than the first Gail Bradley. Might be the same or just a hair smaller than the second Gail Bradley. But notice how very little the hump adds to the overall width of that knife. You know, we kind of buried this blade deeper in the handle than the other two Spideys because, you know, getting to the hole, not as big a deal because of the flipper. However, with that said, you can get to the hole. You can sweep it right-handed, you can flick it right-handed. Left-handed, you can, even though it's partially occluded, you can certainly sweep it, and you can flick it. You can even middle finger flick it. You can Spidey drop it, but it's a flipper. And oh, what a nice flipper it is. Interesting, they buried the knife a little deeper in the handle to reduce this dimension, but then sort of added it back and more with the flipper. But it's not, although it's a bit of a long flipper, it's not overly large. And as we go over the ergonomics later, I'll show you that it's actually kind of an interesting feature. And of course, the CPM M4 blade. You guys know this steel, don't you? We've talked about it enough. It is extremely tough. It attains an extremely high hardness. It takes an extremely keen edge and it holds onto it for like ever. And it's, if you're working in wood or fibrous materials, it's just very hard to beat. Now we've got here, guys, a factory Spyderco edge. You don't see me do this too often with a factory edge, but it's pretty good. Notice it's super consistent in width from tip to hilt, just in symmetrically on both sides ground, and look. You have to get it just right. I mean, it's not a laser through the Natchez Shooter Supply catalog paper, but it's cutting it, not tearing it. Let's see. Let's do a little cardboard with it. Hard to do in close quarters like this, but just to get an idea of how effortlessly it goes through. We're kind of cutting across this corrugated cardboard. I would say average with the factory edge going through cardboard, just average. Drop it up on the pant leg and see what effect that had on its ability to cut paper. Not much. Might have stropped it up a little bit. Anyway, it appears like it's going to be a pretty good cutter. Now, you guys know this. We've talked about it before. The rather coarse satin that you get from Taichung on the CPM M4 might inhibit it going through cardboard just a bit. Okay, now let's talk about the handle because we're getting into some pretty neat stuff here. This is an all titanium handle, and look at this. I remember looking at the prototype video that Eric did on this orange peel finish and thinking, I'm not too sure if I like that. And I'm pretty sure the reason it took so long for these knives to get to production is because it was hard to get this orange peel finish to be repeatable. And guys, this is the second one of these I've seen, production versions, and I'm here to tell you, this orange peel is far more attractive in the production knife than it was in the prototype. It's just beautiful. Has a little bit of a bronze cast to it. I don't know if you can really pick that up. Maybe there you can. It has a little bit of texture. I don't know. I don't know that I'd call it grippy, but it's not slippery either. What I don't know about this finish is how is it gonna hold up to scuffs and scratches. How much is it gonna hide? How much is it gonna show? We just don't know yet. But it's something different, isn't it? And the scales are slightly crowned. I think you can pick that up. Not quite as much as a swish buoy, but they are crowned. I bet you want to know, don't you? What are the dimensions? The blade is listed at 3.49 inches. I measured it with a tape measure and got 3.5, so close enough. The handle is 4 5/8 inches long, so that gives us about 8 1/8 in overall length. Blade stock is 114 thousandths, and the handle, this is really the shocker dimension of the whole knife, only about 385 thousandths thick at its thickest point. So very, very slim. Here next to the Yale Bradley 2. Kind of hard to tell with that wood. Let's see if the black shows up better. Maybe if you look down by the butt end, you can see how much thinner it is. So that makes it great in pocket, and it, I think, presents some challenges in hand. I mean, is the handle too skinny? A knife that might be too skinny that most of us know is a Cold Steel Code 4. Very slim and a little slippery, and some guys think it's just a little insecure in hand. So we're going to have that same issue with the Spyderco Advocate, the Yale Bradley Advocate. Well, when I first picked it up, I thought, man, that knife is skinny. But as I've held it and used it in a variety of grips, it does okay. The corners on the scales are chamfered, and then that orange peel finish kind of works down into that chamfer, which is attractive. So I don't feel any real sharp corners. I think the orange peel gives me just enough tactile security. You know, I'm not sliding around on it. It's just a very handsome, very economical package. So let's talk about these ergos. The saber grip is absolutely phenomenal. The hammer grip works here behind the flipper, and the flipper is not digging into my knuckle at all. And then I can come forward sort of in this this precision power bushcraft hammer grip, and my thumb is not touching the cutting edge. It's sort of rolling around the front of that scale, and that flipper tab is just sort of working between my two fingers, keeping the knife very firmly in place. If I go to that sort of vertical draw cut, I'm super comfy. And in a reverse grip, shockingly enough, that flipper just really helps. It provides a positive stop without being uncomfortable. So for a really skinny knife, they're very good in hand. One thing that I think I watched Tyler's video today, Knives, Guns, and Gear, and he has sort of always had a bit of an issue with releasing the locks on these Yale Bradley knives from Spyderco, and I think that really goes back to the first one, which is an absolute bear. The two got better. It gives you a lot more room, and it's a lot less strong lock bar. It's easier. The air was pretty funky. There's jimping way up here and a little notch cut, but that sort of pinches the skin. So most guys come back here to the access relief for the hole to release the lock. And I think Mr. Bradley sort of learned something. I don't think, as Tyler did, that this lock bar is near as hard to release as any of the others. Now, mind you, it is a very robust lock bar. The lock tension on this thing is heavy. But that goes back to Mr. Bradley's thinking. He never wants one of these knives to come, for the lock to come loose during use. He designs these things so that the lock bars require a great deal of purpose to disengage them. But if you're right-handed, you got this nice big tab formed by the lock bar behind the access hole for the thumb hole. I think you just slide your thumb in there. It's a little farther back than we're used to, but it's really easy to do. And for a lefty, it's kind of a reach, but again, there's just a lot of tension. I don't mind it at all. It's less taxing on my thumb than the GB1 for sure. Let's talk about the mechanism, shall we? Not only is it a flipper, but it's a flipper on ball bearings. You can't see them there, but it's on ball bearings, the cage variety. And I haven't opened this knife up yet to see what makes it tick inside, but I'm going to do that because I'm going to sharpen it. In fact, I'm going to go sharpen it in just a minute, and then we'll take a look inside and maybe see how it cuts afterward. But one other thing I wanted to mention is look at the contrast from orange peel on the sides of the scales to this beautiful polished edge that runs all the way around the knife. And that goes right back to the first Gale Bradley. He loves those polished edges, and I love them too. It just makes the knife so handsome. It looks so buttoned up. I want you to look at that surface in the flipper, okay, right here. Look how nicely finished. And on the front where the finger goes. This really doesn't look like a forward finger choil, but it sure is usable as one. Just look at the quality of that finishing on the edge. And then look here at this, as the spine rolls around the front of the knife. Look how that blade is just perfectly matching the curve of the scales. Just beautiful. Very buttoned up knife. Flipping action, you guys all want to know, don't you? Well, it is basically a push button flipper. And man, look, just by a hair, the axis of that flipper tab is behind the axis of the pivot. So a push down just makes this thing rocket out of the handle. And it opens with a very satisfying sort of muted snick. It can be light switched as well. It almost seems to open with more authority with a push button than it does with a light switch. But really, any way you grab that flipper, the knife's going to come open. Now, on closing, this is not a knife that's going to fall on itself. In fact, it's pretty far from falling on itself. And that really is the case for two reasons. First of all, is this satin finish again. You know, it gives that detent ball a little rough way to go as it's moving through its arc. You can see it's kind of notchy. We got a strong detent, so it rockets open. That isn't really an issue, but on closing, it's a little firm and a little notchy. The notchy comes from that rougher satin, and the firm comes from what I mentioned before, that super strong lock bar tension. There's a lot of load and friction of the detent ball in that blade tang, so it's not going to fall shut. Just not. I like Mr. Bradley's thinking. I don't really want a knife to fall closed when I don't want it to. I like it to stay where I put it. And I like to have robust lock bar tension on a knife that's going to get used maybe kind of hard. By the way, I didn't mention this either. How about 4 ounces, guys? Total weight, 3.5 inch, full titanium, frame lock flipper, 4 ounces. It's a little handle heavy, as you might imagine. Balance point right at about that peak at the front of the lock bar. Definitely not in the finger groove. But all Gale Bradleys are a little handle heavy, and we don't care. Oh, we can grip it like this too. Construction and fit and finish are absolutely superb. Blade centering is perfect. Now, the blade centering can be affected by pivot tightness. Mine actually came favoring the lock side. I was able to let it move well past center, still with no blade play. So you can kind of put that where you want it. But everything is just absolutely finished to the hilt on this knife. Even the hardware seems to sort of match that faint bronze in the handle. Clip is pure Spyderco. Got the polished stainless steel regular Spyderco clip, my favorite Spyderco clip. It is, of course, reversible tip up, right hand or left handed. Mine, of course, is on the left side. Now, let's take it apart, shall we? I'm going to sharpen it, and when I come back to this video, we're going to have it apart and take a look at the guts, see what makes it tick. Okay, guys, sharpening job done, and I will cover how that went when I put the knife back together, but I wanted to give you guys a glimpse of the inner workings of the Advocate. You can see that, guys, this looks much more like it looks more like a handmade one-off than it does a production knife. The inside of the handle scales have been surface ground and polished. Everything's very precise. We have a lanyard tube and two shouldered standoffs locating the back of the knife. So you have the pivot, the internal stop pin, and 1, 2, 3 points of contact, positive location. So this very light 4-ounce knife, constructed pretty robustly, at least as far as its assembly is concerned. There is the stainless steel lock bar insert, which also doubles as an over travel stop, as you can see. And it's seamlessly fitted to the lock bar. Just beautifully done. If I have a concern about the inside of the knife, it's going to be the washers and the bearings. They are really small. Spyderco likes to use these like paper thin stainless washers. They'll oil can. They're sort of dished, and they will flip from being turned one way to the other. And the bearings in the urethane cages are really tiny bearings. I like to see Spyderco use a larger, not larger, but a thicker and surface ground washer instead of these very paper thin stamped ones, and maybe a larger diameter ball bearing. We'll come in close, see if this thing will macro for you. There you go. Interesting. But it seems to work fine, at least for now. And you can see that the pivot is two-sided, but the barrel itself is D-shaped. I don't know if you can see this, but this is one of the knives Spyderco's decided to go ahead and use red Loctite in the pivot. I really struggled to get it loose. There's the show side screw. Yeah. The detail on the hidden part of the blade, very nicely done. Flip this over. You can see that the detent ball is already starting to wear a very tiny smooth track through that satin finish, so that indicates that the knife will get smoother and smoother as we use it. Alright, I'm going to put it back together, and we'll see how it works after I've taken it apart and put it back together. See you in a minute. Okay, and we're all back together. Before I kind of show you mechanically how this thing works after being disassembled and reassembled, I kind of want to show you the edge. You'll know if you back up to before that this sharpened edge is now quite a bit broader than the factory edge was. This is sharpened at 15 degrees per side with an extremely small 18 degree micro. So I don't know, judging by the change in the width of the bevel, I'm guessing this thing was probably sharpened around 20 degrees, which might have been why it fought the cardboard a little bit. And guys, this thing is flipping scary. Just witness the difference in the paper cutting. Push cut. Yeah. So that's a considerable improvement. Now I've got another piece of cardboard. Let's just kind of take a look. I wish I could show you this better, guys. Oh yeah. That's a marked improvement. Much, much, much better. So, I don't know, maybe the precision of the factory sharpening was pretty good. I think the geometry was kind of bad. Do a pant leg strap. Got a little more paper. Still scary. Man, oh golly, that M4, it just gets so sharp. Okay, let's take a look. Our lockup before sharpening was 50 to 60%. After sharpening, it's the same. Centering is, I might be able to, I might loosen that pivot just a hair. Might be favoring the lock side again just a bit. Let's do that now. Before my Loctite sets up, I reapplied blue Loctite, guys, in case you're curious. Kind of an important thing, I think, on these Spyderco ball bearing knives with those paper thin washers. There we go. You do not want to over tighten the pivot. If you do, you really risk distorting them. Okay, still no blade play. I always come down onto the detent ball when I check side play because the lockup of the knife can mask some play. So we've got this now perfectly centered with zero side play and a nice free action. One other thing to discuss about sharpening before I let you guys go. This area of the knife back here is trickier than I thought it would be. Because of the severe angle of that plunge line, I really had to bring the knife this way on the table so my stone could not gouge that shoulder. And I chose to leave that little bit of recurve there rather than trying to get rid of it. I think it sort of makes the knife look better as this transition happens rather than having a big jog in that transition. But it makes it tricky to get down there and make it look nice. Just thought you'd like to know that. Well, that's it for the initial review, putting the Gail Bradley Advocate through its paces. I think it's a pretty special knife. It is not, it's not a hinderer, it's not a strider. It's an elegant performance cutter. And it is. It's elegant and it's a performance cutter. And I think it's rather handsome, don't you? That is it for tonight, guys. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the word in this here Spyderco Advocate are sharp. Merry Christmas, my friends. Merry Christmas. See you later.